Kia, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what you want to come on and chit chat with us about. Again, we're just so thrilled that you do want to come and chit chat with us. So, yeah.
So I'm happy to be here as well. Thank you. So I'm Kia Roberts, and I'm the founder and principal of Triangle Investigations. And Triangle is a group of lawyers and expert investigators conducting misconduct investigations within workplaces, schools, and other organizations. So when I say misconduct, think sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation. And then we also do sexual assault investigations within college campuses and private schools. Prior to founding my firm, I was the first ever director of investigations for the NFL, where I did the investigations for NFL players and employees accused of violating the NFL's code of conduct. So that was everything from workplace bullying, sexual harassment, all the way to the super, super high profile incidents involving allegations of domestic violence, sex abuse, animal abuse, and child abuse. Prior to the NFL, I spent about a decade as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office in Brooklyn, New York, and I finished my time there as a homicide prosecutor.
I'm also from New York, so.
And I finished my time as a homicide prosecutor doing murder cases. I got my law degree at Vanderbilt. I got my undergraduate degree at Duke, and my husband and I have a 9-year-old little girl and a 5-year-old little girl. So that's my spiel.
Okay. I already have
all
questions.
About me.
I have questions already.
Yeah.
Michael Vick, was that you?
I don't talk about NFL stuff.
God
so
damn it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know.
What is NFL?
Football.
Is it like football with the
American
football?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm so annoyed, just personally, not really, but personally, because I just wanted a yes or no. I didn't need the details. I also did want the details, by the way. I'm lying to you. I did want the details.
Please. So... I tell this woman that a woman has been unfortunately and horribly murdered on the end of my street. And she's like, give me all the details. I was like, I don't have any details right now, except for what's going on in the community. Well, it's just weird because we don't really have that, right? It's not really our thing, is to have murders.
Did they catch the person?
We don't know yet. They've got some positive leads, but we don't know yet. It's an island. It's not like they're going anywhere.
And it's like it just happened
yesterday.
Like yesterday, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
First 48.
Literally at the end of my street.
Did you say first 48?
Wait. I walked past a dead body rolled up in a rug on 145th Street in Frederick Douglass a few years ago and didn't realize it until the whole sidewalk was cordoned off by police. And then I was like, and then I read about it on the internet because I was like, what's going on? I was Googling it. And then I was like, oh, that's the rug I walked past. Totally oblivious.
So, okay. So circling back. So when you did these, when you started getting into workplace investigations, what kind of led you into that space? Because I feel like I realized that that's an interesting jump from NFL into more corporate-y or different workplaces. Now that I know what NFL is.
Okay, got it. So the idea to found my firm came to me. I was actually on maternity leave with our baby, who's now 5. So this was 2018. And this is when the Me Too movement was really blowing up. And every other second you were hearing some horrific allegations about Harvey Weinstein or someone else just horrible doing things to people. And I really saw a shift in multiple shifts. One of the main shifts was shifts in cultural expectations about what is and isn't okay at work, right? Certain comments or behavior were really starting to be frowned upon. And then I started to see that a lot of organizations, at least organizations that were trying to do the right thing, were really engaged in being thoughtful and proactive about creating safe and inclusive workplaces. And that type of work can take a lot of different forms. That could be that they were requiring their employees to attend anti-sexual harassment training. There's all these different at that period of time, there was a really big societal shift around this in a way that showed up tangibly in workplaces, in my opinion. And then actually not too long after, if you consider the Me Too movement to be over, and I'm not sure that it is, but not too long after Me Too really blew up, New York State actually codified some things into law around sexual harassment to really speak to this moment. So it was just like a really hot time. And I just thought, I have a resume that's really well suited for this, and let me jump out there and see where it goes. And it has gone obscenely well. And I'm super, super grateful. I always say, good news, my business is going really well. Bad news, people don't know how to behave themselves. So, right.
Well, right. Well, people are weird. So, I love that. I love that you just kind of created this whole thing for yourself.
I also
that's
love
awesome.
this. That's so awesome. So what are some of the things that you're seeing coming through most prevalently? What are some of the things that are, you're getting called up the most? And, would love to know as well, like, when do people call you? Like, when is it in the
Right.
process that they're like, oh shit, something's going down?
Right. That's an excellent question. And it goes a few different ways. I say if you are being thoughtful and deliberate, you call me or our firm, the lawyers that work with me, kind of the second that you start to get an inkling that there's about to be some serious allegations, right? So you get that first call from HR or someone's manager. And, a lot of the reasons that people call us instead of doing investigations internally, right, within their own HR department, is there's a lot of different reasons. People don't have the bandwidth. I think that a lot of organizations are realizing that the amount of hats that HR professionals are being asked to wear at this point is just completely unreasonable. And somebody who knows how to handle benefits and time off and onboarding is not necessarily the person that knows how to do an investigation into really sensitive allegations related to ethnicity, race, sexuality, gender, etc. So some people call us when they first realize, we really don't have anybody in HR that we feel comfortable with doing this. Option number 2 is the person who the allegation is being made against is in HR or is like, a senior person within the organization. And they just, feel like for the appearance and to avoid any allegations of impropriety, it's best to just outsource it. And then option number 3 is when things really blow up in the press, we get the frantic call from either the company itself, their crisis communications / public relations people, or, their general counsel. And unfortunately, once things are in the press and you've gotten the scathing article or, a blurb on TV, it becomes super, super time sensitive. And it's just not a posture that you want to be in as an organization, because it looks like you're kind of trying to sit on things until you really got forced into taking action. So that's kind of the range of ways by which people approach us and find us.
And do you find people are coming, is it more around like sexual or harassment allegations, or is it more around, as we kind of become, because I know you and I spoke about this when we first caught up, is I'm curious to know, is it becoming more prevalent that we're talking more about race as well?
Right. So I would say the hot topics right now are just general discrimination and disparate treatment, especially related to allegations of race. One other big trending topic that I've seen, I would say over the last year, is people having complaints about civility, right? Which isn't necessarily discrimination, but it's just like people being really obnoxious to each other at work. Right. In a way that, especially if you're like from a historically marginalized group, you're like, is this person a jerk? Or is this because I'm Black? Or is it because I'm queer or whatever it might be? And that can sometimes be very, very difficult to figure out. I finished an investigation recently where one of these team members, multiple team members were saying that this person deals with us in a way that it feels bullying. It feels like bullying. It feels like being personally attacked. And this person would send people emails like, okay, so imagine I send Gina an email, half the words are in all caps. I'm putting different fonts. Some of them are in bold, like I told you to, and I think that the most of us that feels a certain way, like reading emails that are written and scripted that way. So the point is that person did that. and a few other things. And people were like, I don't even want to interact with this person, right? Like they're rude when they speak to me. The emails are really nasty. And I was working my way through it, and there were people who made allegations against this young woman. They were a variety of races and ethnicities. And I was just thinking to myself, well, what is that? Right? It's not like necessarily race-based discrimination. It's just like you're being a jerk.
It's equal
So I've seen
opportunity jerkism.
right. No, absolutely. So I've been seeing that a lot where people don't necessarily want to call it discrimination and they don't want to call it bullying, but it is like a general lack of civility that's affecting their workplace experience.
Did you get to the bottom of why this person does this way? Because that sounds almost like a neurodivergent scope.
That's exactly what it was. That's what she claimed.
Oh.
And then, so that's actually something I was going to get to. So this is something I'm like fascinated by. Like my team and I want us to like, over the last few years, like trauma-informed interview techniques have become like super popular, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's maybe a lane that's opening for like neurodivergent investigations involving neurodivergent people. So when I interviewed this person who interacted with people in a way that people really found to be objectionable, she's like, I'm neurodivergent. She's like, sometimes I don't understand that what I'm saying is going to be received by people in a certain way. And I think that's fascinating because then what, right? And I'm not trying to say she was using neurodivergency as an excuse, but I think it comes back to one of those discussions around intent versus impact, right? So perhaps she did not intend to offend people or make them feel bullied or threatened, but that was the impact. And I just wonder how organizations are going to really work their way around that. I think it's going to be really difficult.
It is going to be difficult. We spoke to a neurodivergent and autism kind of specialist who is autistic himself. It was fascinating.
Did he have any recommendations or tips, on neurodivergency in the workplace and how to navigate that?
So he provide guidance to businesses on how better to equip the business with like a D&I strategy to deal with neurodivergency as well. It's
Right.
honestly so fascinating.
That's so good. That's really
So
interesting.
I guess my question here is, did this particular person disclose that she was neurodivergent?
She did to me during my
But
interview with her.
I'm sorry, to the employer, because
Oh.
I think one of the big takeaways with Shea was that he was like,
disclosed.
once you're part of a group or a team, disclose it, because then it's up to the employer to help you make accommodations so you can work in the best fashion, like the best way possible. Like, how can we get this person who's really good at XYZ to continue to perform, taking into, account
their emails might be shit.
Right. Like, so this guy Shea who we spoke to, he had like an auditory thing, I think, right? Like he could hear the humming from certain types of lights and it like was amplified for him. So like, or he gave us an example, and so somebody just gave him like noise canceling headphones, and like the office manager arranged for off like the headphones or removing the light and putting a different light. So if I'm just wondering if it would have gone different for this person if they had divulged to their employer, I am neurodivergent, maybe they didn't know. I can identify with this person. I don't think I'm neurodivergent, but sometimes my emails can come across very
much
like very like it's here's the information, I'm not gonna fluff it, like this is it, and it might rub people the wrong way, but when they have a conversation with me, it's totally different. So I'm wondering if maybe there was, lack of understanding for the team, which is not their fault, because how are they going to be told if they're not told? They don't know what they don't know.
No, that's an excellent point. But I also see the other side of it where a person may not want to share that. Like, I think that that's a difficult decision to make. And
he did talk about that too, because he was like, I don't always divulge during the interview process, but after I'm employed there, then I
And also
will.
there's that element of psychological safety, right? If you don't feel
Right.
safe in your workplace to be able to disclose that you are neurodivergent or that you have any other hidden disability or whatever it is that you're coming to work with, then maybe that's what needs to be assessed, right? Is that
Right.
psychological
Maybe that's not
safety?
a company that's a good fit for this person who does have this sort of unseen disability.
This is we're also fascinated by this now. We're like obsessed.
And we sound like we're experts. We literally know shit about shit.
We know shit.
Like, we had one really great conversation with this guy who does know, and now we're like, oh, we're
Oh, we know all the stuff. No.
yeah, we know it all. So I do think, though, what he spoke to us about is directly related to the anecdote you just shared. So
Right.
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that introduction. Because I think where we're going is we're going to have to create a new, like, I don't remember which one of you said, but it's almost like a DE&I offering, or like a new consideration. And there's going to have to be a new framework totally built around what it means to be neurodivergent in the workplace, expectations, disclosures, etc. Because so many people are having the tools now to proudly identify themselves as being neurodivergent and recognizing the challenges that may present to them in the workplace. I think it's like this really new and uncharted territory. I think it's going to be super interesting.
Agreed. Because now it's being talked about so much more. I think it was never really talked about, as widely as it is now. Like, anytime I open Instagram, it's somebody's like, oh, I just found out I had ADHD, or I'm neurodivergent, or so yeah, I definitely think
for the person with the shitty emails. What was the
what
outcome?
happened to her? Yeah.
She quit.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, she said, it just seems like everybody hates me and I've upset everyone so much, and I think it's just best if I leave. I mean, I think it could have been handled differently, right? So, like, even if the investigation landed that we found that she violated the organization's policies around being, respectful and professional in the workplace, that's something that can be coached and addressed. I don't think it was necessary for her to quit. Nobody, pressured her. That wasn't our recommendation that she be fired. She just said she'd had enough. So, yeah.
I'm curious to dig a little deeper now, because in our first chat that we had, we spoke quite a bit about microaggressions and how those are starting to reflect, like, in the workplace now, and how hard it is to kind of investigate those, right?
Sure.
So I'd love to go into maybe some of the cases you've had, like, not recently, obviously, we're not going to go into like people's investigations, but some of the cases that you've had where you've gone, oh wow, this is actually really curly and really tricky to unpack.
Sure. That's a great question. Well, you and I said when we were talking last time, we're like, maybe it shouldn't even be called a microaggression. Like, because that in and of itself, like, minimizes the importance of what's occurring. And what I said to you, and what I'll say to you again, is how many microaggressions does it take before it becomes toxic? Like, it becomes like a macroaggression, or just like an awful place to exist and, be a person from historically, marginalized group. So I want to think through this. I am doing the work with a lot of organizations right now, helping them figure out what are microaggressions, defining them in a way that people understand them. And what are we doing when people repeatedly engage in the microaggressions, right? So I'm in the middle of an investigation right now. And the person who's made the complaint is a Black woman. And, like, I would say like a middle management kind of position. And she was just like, the amount of microaggressions that she's been made to endure, it's nonstop. Let me give you a few. She just says, people say microaggressive comments to her, like, very much in the trope of like the angry Black woman stereotype. So when I'm interviewing these people about their relationship with her and their interactions with her, they're like, yeah, she's aggressive. She talks too loud. I feel like she's yelling at us in the meetings. So they're repeating the microaggressions back to me, right? So I'm like, well, this person is clearly not making this up. talking over her in meetings, telling her openly in meetings, like, I don't agree with that. That's not the way we do it. That's not it. And then someone actually told her recently that she should really lead, she should begin meetings with new people by talking about herself, her background, and her resume. And that way people would respect her as the leader of a meeting. And okay, so put all of those together, like roll it up in a ball.
And
Is
then we've
that
got our gaggle. Did we go with a gaggle of microaggressions?
a gaggle of microaggressions? Like, I cannot turn to this person and say, it's just microaggressions. Like, the organization and I are now working together saying, how do we address this? Because all of these things cumulatively is like a lot for someone to handle and a lot to deal with. And she wants to quit, and I don't blame her. So I get it.
That's terrible.
So, why do they think they can say that to someone? Like,
Yeah,
and
why do
I mean, and then what do you do when somebody, like, what do you do if somebody is actually has a very loud talking voice and it's maybe not always appropriate? Like, you know, they sit near you and they're on the phone or whatever. How do you then say, like, hey, I'm so sorry, but like, you might not realize how loud you are or whatever. Can you just like inside voice, please? Which is what I tell my daughter. But
oh my God,
like,
I said that to my son in the car. I'm like, we're in
Yeah.
the car, inside car voice.
Yeah, inside voice. So it's like, then do you, because again, back to your point, Kia, like, people are stupid, people are humans, they're gonna fuck up, they're gonna mess up. How do you get your point across in a way that isn't considered a microaggression?
Right. So, well, first thing is, why did they think that they could do that? Because this particular organization and where it's geographically located is with a lot of people that have very little experience with being around people of color at all, much less working with them, and very much so not being supervised by them. So, you know, and the one thing I will say is like, there are different organizations that have more sophisticated employees when it comes to these matters. So there's some organizations like, Gina, think about like a big corporate company in New York. To be told, and I was told that you did this. Oh no, I didn't. Oh, I didn't mean that. These people just very straight faced were like, yeah, I said that to her. Like, they're not even educated in like the space to understand like why these things would be offensive. I don't know. I just, the way that the Black woman interpreted people saying, we feel like you're yelling at us. It's like, is it because I'm Black and I'm leading a meeting and you're very uncomfortable with the idea of being led by a Black person? I think if it had been that alone, people say I talk loud during meetings, we wouldn't be where we are. But it's just all of those things together. It's been very difficult for her.
So what is the point of having, like, I understand that you're investigating, but then what is the outcome of the investigation? Is it, do you make recommendations to the company? Do you like, and how does that work in terms of legality? Like, do you sometimes suggest the individual to sue the company? Like, what do you do with all that information after you've gathered it through the investigation?
So at the conclusion of the investigation, I do what's called a final investigative report, and that walks through introduction, the scope and methodology that was used for the investigation, the standard of evidence that was used, the preponderance of the evidence, was it more likely than not that the allegations occurred? And then the investigation report does end with findings, conclusions, and recommendations for the path forward. So it might be, you know, that this person, there's a very wide range, of course, of corrective actions when an investigation lands with, I think this person probably engaged in the misconduct. So that could be mandatory training. That could be sensitivity training. That could be microaggression training. That could be suspension. That could be termination. It's just a really wide range of corrective action. And then I hand that to the organization and they decide how they'd like to handle it.
You know, I feel like that's something in New Zealand that we're really just a little bit far behind on, is kind of that microaggression awareness and that microaggression knowledge, I want to say. And it's something that I'm surprised that we haven't addressed generally, is that concept of microaggressions, or how those could manifest, or what those actually look like for people that are living them, right?
Sure.
So what would you recommend as, you know, for like a starting point for people to kind of start unpicking what it could look like in their workplace.
Right. Right. So I think every workplace is different based on the demographics, but I think people can do a Google search of microaggressions and look at examples. I think that is very important for organizations and senior management to really have that discussion with employees and identifying it by name. This is a microaggression. Here are examples of it. We have an anti-microaggression policy. If you are found to have engaged in microaggressions, this is the range of corrective actions that you could be subjected to. So what's interesting about that microaggression piece, because this is such like a new and fresh and emerging area, is that there is an organization that I'm not going to name, but it's a very, very, very large company in New York City based in Manhattan. And they have just made a decision that if you are accused of engaging in 3 microaggressive acts that's based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, that automatically triggers an outside investigator coming in and doing the investigation. Automatically.
How do those get logged? How would
I was just gonna say, how does it get reported and how is it proven? I feel like it's gonna be so difficult. You have a great example where the people don't even know how to cover their own asses with this one woman, wherever you were originally describing the micro, but if it's in New York City, most people are savvy enough to at least be like, oh my God, I had no idea you even said that. They might do a little CYA, right? And I think it might be harder to prove when there's more savvy people involved. So let's hear about that.
It's my experience that the human resources business partners within this particular organization, they are really excellent record keepers, right? So it's first I heard that Gina may, misgendered someone. Then I heard that Gina made a nasty crack about Pride Week. Then I heard that Gina made a nasty crack about Black Lives Matter, right? So you're documenting this and really trying to have a system in place where you're that's 3.
This is just an example. I'm not like that.
I appreciate this organization's stance that they're taking because they're realizing it can't just be that HR is these are interpersonal issues, because at a certain point it gets way beyond being interpersonal issues. And it's I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here. So, they're trying to pay attention to it. I'm very interested in seeing how long they keep this going and if they're seeing results, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, what are the outcomes? So you've got this new policy in place of 3 strikes and you're out, essentially. So, what's the outcome of this? Do we have people that are now fearful or, something I might say is misconstrued as a microaggression, or am I just being a blatant asshole at work?
Right, sure. I think that people could definitely be fearful, but I also do understand the long-term implications of what occurs when people just keep saying offensive things, whether you want to call them microaggressions or not. It has a really, really, just a really negative effect on the workplace overall.
Yeah, of course. So,
but I feel with all these rules, right? How does that create a psychologically safe, that's what you're saying, Nicola, the fear, how does it create a psychologically safe work environment where, if somebody did say something and you want to report it, or if you said something and you truly didn't mean it that way. I misgendered somebody once and it was a complete accident. I called a he a she or vice versa. I don't remember. It was just I wasn't thinking clearly. I was getting to my point and it just accidentally came out. I don't know. I would be terrified of doing one thing wrong in a situation like that.
Right. I think people have to be terrified of doing one thing wrong. I just think that's where we are right now. And I don't know if that's the right answer. But I think that, whoops, what happened to my light? I just think that, and I mean, and I want to make this clear. When there are instances where in this organization, where they're saying, if you are alleged to have engaged in 3 microaggressive comments, etc., that automatically triggers an outside investigation. That does not mean that person's going to be terminated. It just means that we're going to get a fresh set of eyes on this. And maybe you need education and training regarding the microaggressive statements and why what you said was problematic. The organization, that particular organization, I think is approaching it from much more of a learning and growing angle, as opposed to being super punitive for people making mistakes, which I think is I think that's the right way to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, because I know a number of lovely people, lovely. And I know that the question is going to be like, yeah, but what's the point, right? What's the point? Because, microaggressions are really just imagine. There's that whole system of thinking where actually microaggressions aren't really a thing. So what do we say to these people? What are we saying to, Aunt Agnes, who has got no concept of the problematic nature that comes with microaggressions? Because I think there's probably going to be some of our listeners that are like, there's no such thing. Come now, stop that crap.
Right. What's the big deal? I mean, I think there are some people who are just generally resistant to it as a concept. But what I always try to explain to people is it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? So standing alone, maybe it's, not earth shaking, but just being subjected to that again and again and again. And one example that I give people is imagine something you're insecure about. I don't know, the way that you look, the way that you dress, your financial situation, whatever. And someone just keeps on making kind of weird comments about it. Number one, first time, maybe you let it roll off your back. But after a certain amount of time, this is something that, is a core part of your identity and who you are. Can you agree that at a certain point, you would start to feel angry, hurt, disrespected, and marginalized? And when I say that to people, they do start to get it.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example, because that gives you like that, you personalize it for people, right? Because I think that's that's the big thing, is people don't get that there is
it's a hard thing to be empathetic about unless you're thinking about it, how it might personally affect you, right? Because it's like you don't really, especially if you're not like very self-aware, so and I don't think many people are self-aware. I think it's rare that you have high functioning, like good employees that are also completely self-aware. Like I think it's a very rare combination. But yeah, I mean,
it's such a fascinating topic. I think that, and then again, I'm guessing you can combine the two together. Now you've got microaggressions, you've also got neurodivergency as well, and you're combining those two together for like a perfect storm of, situations in the workplace that would lend itself to being very toxic. And you've got people around you that are just going like, what is happening?
Right. And I think that a lot of organizations have been put on notice. I was watching the news, this is years ago. This is not my phrase. I did not come up with it, but I stole it and I like to use it all the time. Just talking about like social media and cancel culture. And the person on the news was saying that what we've seen over the last few years has been the democratization of the microphone, right? So it's not, you don't have to go file a lawsuit. You don't have to go get a PR person to get a message out there. You can just send out a tweet, or you could post something on LinkedIn, right? And I think a lot of organizations that have recently gotten bad press about being organizations that are toxic or harmful for Black people or queer people, et cetera, it's usually because of a bunch of microaggressions. So you now have 20 people that identify as being queer, and they each have 5 microaggressions each that they feel like they've endured. You put that together, and now it's a New York Times article, right? About how this is a really difficult, place for a certain group of people. And that's why, when we do like the microaggression math, you have to be really careful with how you're quantifying it and you're quantifying things and how you're counting things.
So I feel like, and this is maybe the incorrect thing, right? But I feel like with sexual inappropriateness, because that could be very many things, right? I feel like that's more like cut and dry. You've got a really clear indication that, oh yeah,
100%.
you gave me the heebie-jeebies, you touched my boob, like whatever it is. I feel like you've got really clear indication that this is not the right thing to do. Whereas now you've kind of got this really, like, I want to say almost gray area of information where you've really got to deep dive and really kind of get into the workplace's culture to understand exactly what's coming out of it more. How do you approach that? Like, when you go into an organization, like, what are some of the first questions you're asking to kind of get that culture pulse check?
Right. So I generally like to start with the person who hired us. So that could be their general counsel, their head of human resources, their head of the employee experience. Just like, how would you describe the culture of this place? And people are usually pretty transparent about that. Like, people don't really like it here. We have a really high turnover. We have a problem with recruiting this particular type of historically marginalized group of employees to come here. We have a problem with people leaving, and one of the things I always say is like, do you know what your trending issues are right now? Like, is it racially based microaggressions? Is it misgendering? Is it sexual harassment? And I feel like once I have kind of put my arms around that, then I'm then in a better position for understanding the culture of the organization to address what's going on in a way that'll be helpful.
And what are some of the questions you end up asking the employees? Do they kind of know you're coming? Are they prepared for that? How can someone prepare for you coming in to question them?
Sure. So there's some language that I send to whoever the person is that's going to make the introduction between myself and witnesses, and it talks through who I am, what we'll be discussing, and if you have anything that you think would be helpful for me to see, i.e. emails, text messages, screenshots, etc. If you could have that ready for our meeting, that would be great. And in terms of preparation, I always say that it's very rare that I speak to someone once, right? I have an interview with someone once and they'll say, oh my God, I forgot to mention this. And then we'll get on another call because we're human and that's just the way our brains work. But I always want to give people as much opportunity as they want and need to really walk through what their experience has been, and so that we can approach it in a substantive way.
That makes sense.
Because I think, like, especially with talking about microaggressions, like versus, something that might be a little more cut and dry, like what Nicola said, sexual inappropriateness. How do you stop it from becoming a he said, she said? Because I just, like, in my head, it just feels like somebody's going to be like, well, you said blah, blah, blah in X meeting.
You said I was too loud in the meeting. Okay, well, you were too loud in the meeting.
Or just like, oh no, I didn't say that, I insinuated it. Like, or, like, I just feel like it can be so muddy, like, and so hard to kind of pull out the truth. Because, everyone has their own idea of the truth or how they experience the situation. And it's like, you have to come in and kind of find the middle ground, which is the actual truth. So how do you do that and like, how does that work? Like, the whole idea overwhelms me in my mind. I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't know what to say. I'd be like, everyone's talking at me. They're using too many words. Please leave me alone. Yeah. How do you?
You're asking what exactly? Like, what's the approach for what piece of it?
Well, like when you're gathering
to avoid
evidence,
the he said, she said.
How do you avoid
good.
from getting like being bogged down in so and so said this and so said this, and how do you kind of arrive on your truth?
So and just by nature of a lot of these investigations, a lot of them are he said, she said situations. That's just the way it is. This person did not make this offensive comment in front of the whole team. They just said it specifically to you, right? So when it lands that way, I'll try to speak to the person that made the complaint, right? when I'm like, you know what, this is a tough one. I'm not saying you made something up or you were being overly sensitive, but don't really know where to land with this one. And I'll say, ideally, what would you like to have happen here? And I found that to be a super, super helpful question, because somebody will just say, I just don't want them to do it again. And I can go to the person and say, listen, this is what you said. This is how it was interpreted and received. This is the impact it had upon this person. In the future, maybe we should try to fill in the blank, right? And I think that sometimes that's the best it's going to be, right? Like, it's not always going to be, oh my God, I cracked the case, I know what happened here. And then it's not always going to be like, here comes the hammer and you're getting fired and walked out by like security, right? Like, there's a lot of shade between that.
Sure, because I'm like, oh my God, what if you went into some place and found like a whole like embezzling scheme that was big, you know, like this is like the stuff like TV makes you think, right? Like Goliath and all these things. It's like you go into like settle a little thing and then it's like there's a big thing behind it. So I'm waiting to hear that story, which you may not have yet, but you might one day.
Television show?
Yeah. It was on Amazon Prime. It was about a lawyer who like took a small case and then it turned into this big thing. So as he was investigating it, it like turned into like a whole like thing. There was like, you know,
good. You like it?
It was very good. It's very good. There's no more season.
For a new show.
Yeah,
I recommend The Consultant. Have you done The Consultant yet?
Yes, and I really, really liked it.
We're obsessed.
It was so weird.
Season 2.
I didn't like the season 2. He's gold. He's just a man made of gold. He's a non-entity. He's just like a machine. Anyway.
Well, now
we digress. Try Goliath.
we digress.
Yeah.
Circling back. So okay.
Yeah.
So coming
in. Have you had any of those crazy investigations where it turned into be something way like you were like, oh shit, that was just like the tip of the iceberg? If you have to think about it, the answer is no, because you would know.
Yeah, no, I don't think
it would be so big that you would be like, yep.
I don't feel like I've had a ton of investigations where like the scope becomes like huge. I'm like, oh my goodness, like it usually stays pretty confined.
No scope creep.
But I will say this is once I enter the picture, people are usually extremely excited to speak with me. Usually they just are. They're like,
do they just want to spill the tea? Are they like, let me tell you what John Smith did to me one day? Like,
oh my God,
they like
Shannon
that?
in accounting? What?
The worst.
They almost turn into like therapy sessions, and I just have to sit there. I'm like, well, there's some, you know, it's like, well, I don't know anything about what John said to Sue, but I do know when I was on maternity leave, they kept emailing me and they wouldn't give me a break, you know? So you just have to let people speak about their experiences, and which is also good because at the conclusion of the investigation, I'm able to go back to a client and say, I know we were investigating this specific allegation, but I want to make aware of other concerns that people have brought up during my conversations with them.
Now, and don't you think that kind of gives you an like a sort of brief snapshot of the company culture when you're hearing all, like when you start hearing extraneous things, but they're all sort of starting to line up?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And I think with the work that I do, sometimes it becomes very clear to me that I have the complete buy-in of the leadership, and you know, they are really taking this seriously. And sometimes it's like, you aren't taking this seriously at all. You know, like it's a risk management move. There was an investigation that I finished recently, and it was a man that was accused of sexually harassing his female coworker. So I completed the investigation. I feel very confident that this happened. Like, this man sexually harassed her at a company event. Her face falls, like the whole table is looking. Like, it was very obvious that, you know, he said something, right? So I concluded the investigation. I'm like, I found that he did, you know, engage in this conduct, and he violated your company's code of conduct regarding sexual harassment. Like, he's gonna have to attend a training. I have a good friend who does that type of training. He's like, got it. I'm like, okay, now this is the CEO of the organization. He was like, thank you so much. Okay, so let's set up a call between you, him, and myself, and we'll talk through your findings. I'm like, let's do it. I mean, we do that all the time. We got on that call. The CEO like threw me under the bus. weird way. He's like, I don't see anything here. I'm like, we just spoke about this yesterday. Like, you cannot be serious. So in organizations like that, you know, the CEO is like, we're on the call. We're on board. We're on board. He's like, I got it. And then we got on the call with the person who engaged in the sexual harassment, and you're like minimizing it and like questioning the investigation. And I was like, what was the point of this exercise? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
why did he do that 180? That's so weird.
Because this particular organization, a lot of their money is based on sales, and he's one of their best salesmen. And I think once he got into that meeting, he started to think, I don't love that he did this, but at the same time, I don't want to ostracize him and make him leave. I think that's exactly what happened.
But couldn't he just say that? Been like, I do think you did this. It was like, you know, a small blip on your radar. Like, obviously this is inappropriate. We're going to send you for training. We're here to, you know, we're like, couldn't he have announced like, or just like discussed it in a way that was nurturing rather than minimizing? Like, you know, we're not here to like point.
He very much chose not to. And it definitely felt like a good old boys moment, you know, like, this is nonsense. And it's like, you know what? You did not have to hire me for this. You could have just ignored it.
You know what, kid? You get paid at the end of the day. You get paid. So who fucking cares? I mean, like, get that money.
True. Like, but that was pretty rare. Most people don't do that.
Yeah. Like, does it feel demoralizing when that happens? Or are you just like, whatever, I did what I was hired to do. I did a good job and now it's out of my hands. Like, how do you feel? And again, you said it was rare, so you know.
I won't say it was demoralizing, but it was shocking. Like, because the CEO seemed like a really good guy. And I think usually when people hire me, it's because you're taking this seriously. Like, if you're involved in cover-ups and like, you know, sticking your head in the sand, you're not hiring us. Like, you're just not. So for, you know, for us to have been hired and then for him to have taken that position on the call with him, it just was confusing. But I think I just realized that, you know, it's one of those organizations that is very concerned about bottom line and profitability, and he's one of their best salesmen. And the takeaway that I got from that conversation was that, you know, profitability and margins in that organization are more important than workplace culture. And that was the takeaway.
Which is probably detrimental to the company as a whole versus just just approaching this one good salesperson and say, like, we value you. We don't want to lose you. We do need to send you for this training. Let's figure out a way, you know, collectively to make you better and more comfortable here. Like, I do believe it was a one-off. Like, you could have even thrown the guy a bone. Like, you were probably drunk. Right. You wouldn't have done this normally. Like, whatever. You could have given him a bone, but still gotten the point across and done it in a way that maybe makes him even feel valued as an employee there.
Right. Well, and by the way, I feel very confidently that this person is going to do this again. Just I heard too many things.
But I mean, you know better than me, so like, but you know, I mean, he probably will.
And he had a thing with the young saleswomen always being around, and he wanted to mentor them. It was just like a lot of things that put my radar up.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like, this wasn't a one-off. So yeah.
You know, we're kind of coming into the silly season, right? What we call the silly season, which is a great opportunity for us to have Christmas parties and get drunk and do inappropriate things for no particular reason, because, you know, just because we're wearing, I heard at a conference the other day, just because we're wearing the hot dog suit doesn't mean we stop being, you know, Joe from HR. So what are the things that people can do to avoid that happening at their functions or work things that are coming up?
Don't drink.
You can't. You're like, you can only be responsible for yourself, right? And this person who made the sexually inappropriate remark to his female employee, he said to her, do you know why you're the #1 salesperson in your region? And she's like, because I work really hard. He's like, no, it's because you're effing hot, man. Ew. You know, just so in that particular situation, there's not anything that this woman could have done to stop him from saying that.
What is wrong with me that I'm like, that's not even that bad. I've had worse.
Oh my, well,
I'm like,
well, when I spoke to her, she was like, it's two things. First of all, I thought it was inappropriate. She's like, second of all, we
it
were
is.
like, you know what, like at one of those big rounded tables, she's like, I had a visible reaction because I was upset and embarrassed, and everyone's turning and looking at me like, what's going on over there? And she was like, and number three, I work extremely hard. She was like, so it was, offensive to me for all of those different
No, and I'm not
reasons.
saying that it's not. I'm just saying, what the fuck is wrong with me that I'm like, compared to everything else I've been through in like my like whatever 20 plus career of being like working.
I've had worse said to me as well, which is also why when the organization hired me to do the investigation and then kind of like did this 180 at the end, I was like, huh, that's interesting.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, granted, all those things that happened to me were like in the early 2000s. Like, I think we've come a long way in corporate culture in America in terms of what is appropriate and what's not.
Takeaways. So one thing that I always tell people, and this is whether it's related to microaggressions, sexual harassment, bullying, just anything that is making your workplace experience negative, document it, right? I think sometimes people overthink what it looks like to assert yourself or really properly document what's happening to you, right? You don't need to go get a lawyer. You don't need to pay a retainer. You don't need to go get like a secret recording device. You can just use the notes section of your app and, this date, this time, this person said this. We were here. It made me feel this way. This date, this time, this person made me feel this way. And, ultimately, whether a person decides to go to human resources or they decide to file a lawsuit or they decide to get a lawyer to help negotiate their exit, it's helpful in every single instance. So that's my one tip that I always give everybody. If you are being subjected to things that you don't like and don't feel good within the workplace and, really veering on the edge of misconduct, just keep a really good record of it while you're going through the decision process of deciding how you want to handle things.
What are some of the things that people can keep a track of? What, like, other than, noting down, interactions, or let's say in the case of microaggressions, noting down what the microaggression was, for example, be it, so-and-so misgendered me today on purpose, whatever it was, what other things can people keep evidence of?
So I would just say that my general rule of thumb is like, we all know when things don't feel good, right? Like when somebody makes a comment and you can't necessarily define it or maybe put a name on it, but you're like, the young kids say like, it gives you the icks, right? Like somebody just says something that you don't like, just put it down. Even if you never do anything with it, if you're at the job for another 6 months and then you leave for your dream job, it's just good to have because you don't know at what point things are going to change substantially. You're going to say, oh my goodness, I've got to negotiate my way out of here. And now you're trying to piece together these previous experiences that you had. It's really good to have it down on paper in one centralized location, or not on paper, but like in your phone, whatever.
Okay. And okay, so what are some other ways, like businesses, for example, what are some ways that businesses can prepare or like almost get ready for if you were to come in and investigate them? What is the best way for businesses to prepare in that instance?
I would say that a lot of organizations really need to be thoughtful about when do they think it's time to pull an independent investigator, right? And that lies within a lot of organizations being very brutally honest with themselves about the capabilities and experience level of their human resources function. There's a lot of organizations that just say, we love our HR people, they're the best. They don't know how to do this type of work. So we have to get you and your firm to come in. So I think that there are a lot of organizations who realize that. And I think that's the first thing, like organizations being honest with themselves about what is the capacity and bandwidth of our human resources team. Do we feel like they are equipped and educated and knowledgeable enough to handle an investigation into really sensitive allegations of misconduct related to race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, etc. And then organizations really have to do the work of creating, what their non-negotiables are, right? So like, really, that's not just sexual harassment anymore. Like I said earlier, talking about civility, that's become like a really hot topic lately in a lot of organizations that I've been doing work within. Just people speak to each other rudely and send rude emails.
You would assume that civility is just kind of a given.
It's not. I did an investigation recently, and I shouldn't laugh because it's not funny, but it was like this person like checked the wrong box. You remember like when you would get paychecks at work and you could do like tax selections, like a certain amount of taxes come out of the paycheck, and she like checked the wrong thing and got a paycheck for like $3 or something because she like checked the wrong boxes.
I feel like we've all done that at some point.
I feel like I've done something like that, and I've been like, I thought I was helping myself, but I like the language is so sort of murky that you're like doing the exact opposite. Yeah. Like,
right. So she's going nuts. So she's reaching out to the human resources business partner. I want my money. I want my money. How do you think it would be okay to pay me $3? And the woman's like, you checked the boxes. Like, this is how we got here. So she's like, I want my money. I want my money. And to the point that the human resources person now reaches out to me and was like, I need you to do an investigation into her against me. She's bullying and triggering me at this point for a mistake that she made.
Yeah.
So when I reach out to this person who went nuts about the paycheck, I'm like, let's set some time on the calendar. I just want to talk about what happened. This person was really upset about the interactions that they had with you and the way you behaved about the paycheck. And this person called me stupid. She was like, this is stupid. You're ridiculous. You're a joke to me.
What? And you're like, I'm just a third party, man. I don't have any skin in the game. Leave me alone.
Which I actually found to be interesting. That is a very extreme example. Most people, when I come around, are like on their best behavior. This person, not so much. So the way she was, really coming after the HR business partner, calling them all hours of the night. It's 11 o'clock. Where's my money? I mean, what are we calling that? Bullying, harassment, incivility? I think organizations really have to be thoughtful about how they're defining certain types of misconduct and then creating a really concrete set of corrective actions for the misconduct when it's found that it has occurred.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening with that one particular thing? I'm curious.
Well, that's funny you should mention that, because my recommendation was for this person to be terminated, right? Because this person had multiple blow-ups of people and just seemed just really unstable, and it just didn't seem good. And I was worried about this, continuing to be a recurring issue within the organization. That particular organization, I was called in after a really, really, really high profile publication wrote a scathing article about the workplace culture. And senior leadership was too scared to fire this person because they thought that this person was going to go back to the press and say some more bad things. So she remains at that organization to this day.
Did she ever get the whole pay thing figured out?
Yes.
Like that, like, I don't understand how it like got to that level. Like I would have just been like, oh shit, I marked the wrong box. How can we figure this out so I can unmark it and just pay me what I should have been paid? Like, how does it get to like such a crazy level like that?
I don't have an answer. But I know that I got called a joke and it cracked me up. No pun intended. I was like, I'm a joke.
You're like, bitch, you checked the wrong thing, you stupid bitch. No.
Who can't read today? Who can't read? You can't read.
Yeah.
Don't call me stupid.
I'm stupid.
I have a law degree. Bugger off.
You know what I like to do when people call me that? I'm like, you're probably right, but the issue at hand here, like, just agree with them. Let them go on with the bad self.
Okay, I'm a joke and you marked the wrong box.
Yeah. Girlfriend.
Yeah. I'm here because of you, but I'm a joke. Okay. Yeah, please tell all of our followers, if anyone's still listening to us at this point in the game.
If anyone's still with us at the end of this episode, I'm amazed.
If anyone has made it this far in all of our podcasts for all of creation ever, tell us where we can find you, Kia, and we'll link everything for our...
My firm's website is www.triangleinvestigations.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Kia, Kia, last name Roberts. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Okay. Thank you about Goliath. It's on my list. All right, new friends. Y'all are fun. Let me know when it goes live.
We will do.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Great rest of the day.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Let's Break Up, Toxic Workplace Stories. If you enjoyed our candid conversations and insights, don't forget to hit that like button, follow us on social media, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform.